Hey there, cats and kitties. I am the Blues Man, Johnny Blues, and with this video, we'll be discussing my thoughts on episode 19 of the anime series ClassicaLoid. And this was actually a nice, light reprieve of an episode after the one that came last week, which was just full of so much minutia, doing with the overarching plot of the series. And I went in depth, talking at length in an almost half an hour long, maybe 25-minute long video, just because I was chomping at the bit to get all that stuff coming to the fore again. And I was really wondering how Tchaikovsky and Badrzewska would fill in and fit into all of that stuff, because they're off on their own a large, section of the time, a large amount of the time. They're not with the other ClassicaLoids in Kanai's manor house, so they're not being affected by the same sort of awarenesses that are befalling Beethoven and Mozart and Chopin and Liszt and all that stuff. The idea of rejuvenating the music and honing it and being able to control it, all the things that we've seen in the last few really wacky episodes, have come to the fore by the end. They haven't experienced that, and adding insult to injury, they've actually had their falling out. Badrzewska has been sort of trying to be a solo artist for a time now, and we haven't really found out what Tchaikov has been up to, other than she was trying to sell stuff at the school festival a couple episodes back. And so I guess Bach-sama actually did grab her up and take her back to the agency, and they've sidled them both together by the start of this episode. They're on this sort of morning news program having an interview, and they take a reader question or viewer question asking, there are rumors about you two potentially breaking up. Is there any truth to that? We believe in you. And it's that last sort of swan song to that particular message that really peeves the hell out of Tchaikovsky, and she loses her ever-loving crap all over her TV, because she's like, why would you even ask if you believe in us? And she just, she's pretty much crooning along those lines of, there is something going on here. We can't stand each other. Forget it. It's done, everything like that. So Bach ends up grabbing both the girls up and just leaves them, strands them at Kanai's manor house, because I guess he's had enough awareness at this point, enough has awakened within him to realize whatever's going on in Kanai's mansion is benefiting the rest of the ClassicaLoids, probably toward the ends that will justify his means. Whatever it is, the collection of the 8 sounds and all this stuff, I believe this is speaking to an evolution of each of the 8 ClassicaLoids. And as I say, with Tchaikovsky and Badrzewska being with Bach, they're not really going through that. Bach must have hit that at a high point early on. And that is why he has such power and prowess and everything like that. And, just a few minutes into this episode, I already knew what the point of it was going to be. I already knew where they were going with it. It was about aligning, Tchaikov and Bada all over again, getting them to really try to appreciate each other and make amends with each other and come back together. And, of course, hilarity ensues in this as Tchaikov loses it, after having been dropped off, and Badrzewska's like kind of needling her, sticking it to her. Well, he fired you, of course. Of course he's going to do that. You don't want to follow the rules. You don't want to play fair with me and everything like that. And she has no concept of the fact that, hey, you were abandoned at the manor house too, lady. Like, what are you talking about? Oh, it's Tchaikov who was the only one who got fired. You're there too. And that's the point. They're both supposed to be there, so they will both come back together again. And Tchaikov, she unleashes the musique, and this creates a whole fictional, mind-trippy world based upon the Tchaikovsky classic Swan Lake, which is something I've always had interest in, and I just have never got around to actually sitting through the entirety of the play and really understanding what it was all about and everything. So I was really glad, once again, learning something about these classical composers. We are basically told what exactly Swan Lake is, what it all amounts to, the evil sort of demon or evil presence Rothbart, which is parodied in this episode, and the idea of unrequited love and being sort of faked out, and witches' enchantments and all this kind of stuff, and that there are 2 versions, one which was very bittersweet, where it becomes lovelorn and love lost, and the alternative version where the hero sort of saves the girl and all that kind of stuff. And we're seeing a lot of those aspects in play in this episode, one thing I will say as far as the pairings go, because the entire gist of this Swan Lake world, as overseen by Hashi in the Rothbart equivalent, and we're seeing a whole bunch of Hashis, you know, multicolored, it's like Fruit Loops all over the place with all the different colored Hashis, but he's basically describing any sort of pairing. And immediately you're thinking romantic pairing, lover pairing, you know, that kind of thing. But it could be anything. It could be infatuation, friendship, partnership, amends, and all this kind of stuff. And just being, you know, well suited to each other, just being complementary to each other. As we see, some of the more shocking ones was the fact that Schubert and Chopin ended up together. Whereas I was sure going into this episode it was going to be Schubert and Beethoven somehow. You know, Schubert's own sort of notice me senpai aesthetic, I was sure was going to come to the fore, and that was going to solidify his getting sent packing with Beethoven in tow. But lo and behold, do we actually see Beethoven maybe kind of sort of is digging on Kanai a little bit. And I was like, oh, because we know Motz is that way. And he's come to Kanai's rescue so many times, you could argue, well, maybe there's a little bit more going on there. Whether it's an infatuation, whether it's a fatherly thing, it doesn't really matter, because all of that is in tandem and in tow with whatever this grand game is that this Rothbart Hashi bird has set forth. Of course, it's something more lustful when it comes to Sosuke and Liz, and he's just checking her out and like, well, bang, you know, I'm gone. And what the hell was with that, by the way? Kanai decides to become like the servant maid, the cat maid and everything. And then after she gets reprimanded by Liz, suddenly she's in like a soldier uniform or a police uniform or something, just out of the blue at random. And it took, as I say, Beethoven saving her in the end. But only after Sosuke, you know, we find that rather than risking life and limb, life and death, all of the ClassicaLoid, Sosuke, and everything like that, they're all just sent out of this dreamscape that everyone has inhabited from the start of the episode. Motz is immediately sent packing because apparently some of his fangirls from Kanai's school have come over, invited themselves over. She says, I love how Beethoven, like, it reprimands her. He's like, I don't want these women in my mansion ever again. You know, she's like, whose mansion? You know, who the hell do you think you are? But yeah, like, the whole idea that this was all really just the grand design, the hilarity that ensued to bring Chekhov and Bada back together. I just really appreciated it, and I really liked it, because we haven't seen as much of those two as I would have liked, you know, and it's been a niggling thing in the back of my mind to really wonder and contemplate, well, if all the other ClassicaLoids are aligning to whatever this purpose is, whatever this grand design is of the 8 sounds that Bach-sama is trying to achieve, what about these two? You know, if they're falling out especially, I mean, they need to be sort of in a partnership and working together, I think, to bring the best out in each other, because they have no one else. And he's not really being all that helpful in his guidance, you know, constantly speaking in those one-word musical terminologies and everything, which, granted, even if Chekhov understands, it really isn't helping her along. She's constantly arguing about the fact he never speaks to us. So she's kind of filling in the plot holes in her own mind, trying to gauge what it is he wants when he does that. And yeah, I mean, it was a hilarious, again, a light reprieve of an episode with all the heavy-handed stuff that was in the previous, all the minutia and all the depth of story, bringing back the enigma, the mystery that started us all out, really. And I appreciated all of that, and I loved all of that. But I liked that we had such a calm, soothing, easily predictable, but no less hilarious episode to follow on from that. And it looks like the hilarity will ensue in the next one. So, I mean, what more could you ask? And yeah, just loved it all around. Love to hear from you guys in the comments below what you thought of this particular episode of ClassicaLoid. If you've seen it as well, if you loved it, hated it, anything goes in the comments below. Just love having that conversation. Otherwise, that'll be pretty much it for me on this. With this video, find you well, and I'll catch you all later. Peace.